what is the goal of decentralization within these platforms? How do you guys look to achieve that? And what does decentralization mean for your protocol? Because there's so many different spectrums of decentralization. It's also important to note that you guys aren't just going to write a white paper and then people are going to come build this. There needs to be people at the helm, especially in the early days. So we'll start this off with Spin. What is this term of decentralization? How are you guys looking to get there?
Well, that's a tough one. So I mean,
No, and the point here is like this one
I mean,
is open. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, like ultimately, it makes like like in my opinion, like personally, I'm thinking that it should be something that governance is like when the platform participants basically like and all of the token holders are so much into the product that they're incentivized to make decisions that drive the product forward. And these are not only like very like extremely smart people, for example like Wintermute on DYDX, and Three Arrows on DYDX proposing some special changes in their kind of incentives for market makers and proactive trading on the platform. And this is something very tricky. So basically, driving the entire community around the protocol to ultimately manage it in terms of like product commercials, um, bringing more people to the platform. All of that is like extremely complicated and not kind of and ultimately in the very end not kind of orchestrating all of those people to kind of propose any of the decisions and not making them kind of vote for those decisions, but in a sense giving them the freedom to do that on their own and giving them a sense of kind of empowerment that they can do that.
definitely. And just to add on here before we jump to the next person, I think it's really notable just to put you this North Star is decentralization, but there's so many complex layers beneath this. Not only are you guys building derivatives on chain, which is extremely difficult, but then you take this other layer and it's we still don't know how to govern society and make things decentralized throughout the world. So this is always just one of those fun, more broad questions. How do you get there? What does it mean? And it's fun to talk about because we are so early in this DeFi space. I'll toss this over to Ryu next and just hear what you have to add on to that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think like we're still super early in really all of the protocols trying to figure out what's the sort of best fully decentralized model, right? Everyone's trying to do their own thing, and just trying to figure out and play around and see what could be the thing that brings everyone into a more efficient decentralized organization, right? Because like, or at least from what I've observed, right, a lot of the sort of issues that you still see in a centralized environment are not necessarily entirely removed in the current state of decentralized organizations, right? You still have a few players that make most of the voting decisions. You still have a few whales that make most of the sort of votes in a lot of these organizations, and that's not too different from unfortunately how a current democracy works. And so the sort of the goal with decentralization is super noble, and I think like we will definitely get very close to it, but I think in the current state there's still a lot of improvements to be made, right? I think goals, steps towards that are of course to sort of decentralize voting. I think like every protocol will sort of go layers through that. But I think like really when it comes to an exchange, what's most exciting is that like the story that I like to tell is like if a large player and trader, or even the regular retail trader, is trading on a centralized exchange, you end up paying a lot of fees, maybe a non-trivial amount directly to a centralized entity, whereas in a decentralized way you can also gain upside on paying those fees, because those fees goes to an insurance fund. They capitalize DAO treasury, and that sort of those fees, either directly or indirectly depending on protocol's design, end up going back to you, and you end up riding the upside in sort of trading on that protocol. And so that's sort of how the sort of framework that 01 is thinking, like, how do you align incentives for people who trade on your platform? And I think, like, that's really how you're going to get to decentralization, right? Like when everyone is sort of aligned, incentive aligned to sort of be helping the network and promoting the network.
Yeah, that was very well put. Eric, do you want to add a little bit more on that? I also know Eric has a hard stop coming on. I have one more question. It'll get a little broad, so we'll start it off with you, but go ahead and add on the idea of decentralization.
Yeah, I think obviously Injective's DNA is always about full decentralization. Even as back as 2018, the entire design philosophy of the Injective chain and all the components related are all are all based on a fundamental pillar that there can't be a single central component, no matter how difficult it might be for different engineering choices or different scalability concerns. There cannot be a single centralized component within the entire lifecycle of any trade or any behavior of the users of the platform or the protocol. And I think the good thing about where we are now and the entire community is that the Injective chain really did embody that philosophy. So, I mean, like right now, what the Injective community really focuses on is kind of having a more efficient voting system and also governance process. Right now, basically, there's an issue where there's so much governance proposals going on. I think within a very, very short period of 2 or 3 months since the canonical launch, there has been over 100-ish proposals already. And figure out the right way to strike a balance between, I would say, having the right type of voting period for different types of proposals, and also finding the right balance between validator participation and also general user participation, which I think is kind of the key component that the community is currently trying to figure out.
Yeah, definitely interesting to hear that. And then Barrett, you want to close this one up? And then I have another broad question after this to tie up our discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody here touched on like really important parts, right? Decentralizing voting. How do you do that? How do you incentivize the community to really participate and participate in like a meaningful way? I think is really important, right? There are of your token holders, there's already like a small percentage, or at least currently, that are actually going to participate in like the governance proposals. And how do you structure something to get the broad token holders to participate, right? And I think that there's like a number of really interesting ways to do that. It could be from the revenue distribution. You could structure it so that you're essentially paying people to participate, right? Not just like kind of this dividend style methodology that some protocols are taking right now, but like, hey, like you like some people stake to get that revenue, but you could design it in a way that where you have to make proposals and vote and like participate in open discourse, and then for your actions that you have taken for advancing the DAO forward, right, and the protocol, you get compensated for that. And I think that that's something that we're heavily looking at Cypher, is kind of some new mechanisms on how to really drive that truly decentralized voting, to where it doesn't matter if you have 10 tokens or 1 million tokens, right? Like you feel that you're being compensated and want to participate in that on-chain governance, right? I think that there's like also like a number of other ways of I mean, that's like that's the holy grail of decentralization, is getting everybody in your community to be participating and voting, right? But obviously everybody here is built on a blockchain, so there's like inherent decentralization on like the back end, right? I think often overlooked is like the front end. You know, a lot of stuff is hosted in GCP, AWS, and you know that is, you know, at the end of the day, like relatively centralized, if not completely centralized, right? And you can, you know, as some of these, you know, more, you know, decentralized cloud services come out, right, you can migrate your front end to being hosted on one of those. Akash, for example, I've started to see people, you know, utilize Arweave for hosting front ends. I think that that's like really cool, and again provides like another aspect of decentralization, right? But I think what everybody here and in DeFi at large is really trying to figure out is how to, you know, gain that complete buy-in from the community to, you know, maximize the number of votes that you are getting, right? And how do you do that? I think that there's a number of ways, but one of the ones I think it could be like paying for participation, essentially.